Welcome back to Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined today by Drew Mentalk of Irish Illustrated and John Bryce, who will be known later this month as John Bryce of USA Today. Congratulations, John. And while JB was sending me mean-spirited, taunting pictures of the Strand in Manhattan Beach over the weekend, Drew was instead doing God's work in Indianapolis covering the NFL Scouting Combine, where Jeremiah Love ran as fast as I expected. Price and Fields did not. Raritan ran faster. But I want to lead to you, Drew. Were you involved in the Mackay Lemon interview at all? Or do you want to just go right into the Notre Dame stuff?
I didn't see that, but it does sound like his personality is getting him some attention he probably doesn't want right now. So it sounds like maybe that's also how he interviewed. So we'll see how that plays out for a guy who is thought to me maybe even go ahead of Jeremiah Love. So it sounds like they're going opposite directions right now, but we'll see. But yeah, as you mentioned, Jeremiah Love was honestly maybe one of the biggest stories coming out of the combine. Just I think a lot of NFL draft analysts, even just like Todd McShay, didn't think he was going to be that fast. So I don't know if it's maybe a Notre Dame perception or something like that. But I think going out and do a 4.36 and almost seeming disappointed after it, I think got him a lot of attention. Eli Raritan, as you mentioned, also had a good day. He was a little lighter. He dropped down to 245, which was very much intentional. He called it his combine weight. But then ran a 4.62, which amongst tight ends who ran at the NFL Combine is the fastest by a Notre Dame tight end. That's slightly shorter than Tommy Tremble, who didn't have a combine because of COVID, but it's faster than Tyler Eifert ran a 4.68. He also Raritan jumped, I think, 38 inches in the vertical. Um, his athletic score was off the chart. So even though he's a little lighter than you wanted, he still came out big. He was 6'6", so he really impressed. Those two, I think, did really well. And I don't think anyone had a bad weekend. I think maybe some people did poorly in some areas, but overall, I think everyone at least helped themselves, or I don't think anyone hurt themselves too much.
JB?
Yeah, I think that we had all hoped, and there'd been some positive buzz percolating about Malachi Field. So I think you might have expected he would have maybe had a tenth of a second better time on the 40. I'll be curious to see if he elects to run at the Notre Dame Pro Day again. That'll be 3 weeks away in later March. So he's got time to train more and decide, and he'll be running a bunch during that time and seeing if he's consistently clocking a better time. And if he is, then I would think he would run again. I thought Eli Raritan acquitted himself very, very well. I thought that he ran a really good time. Obviously, Kenyon Sadiq was a freak with his 40 time, and Eli Stowers was a freak at that positional group with his vertical jump. But Eli, I thought, tested well all the way around. Janarian Price showing his strength, and as someone else said to me over the weekend, and we laughed about it for Jeremiah Love last week, like Janarian Price in a 60-yard dash might have turned more heads than what he did in the 40-yard dash. So, Emil Wagner interviewed well, I think, from talking to somebody this morning that was there all week, especially around a bunch of NFL people. So he did okay there. He's still going to have questions about his strength in the NFL for all of its strategy and finesse is still a mano league. So I think that will be the number one thing is that Emil Wagner has to continue to show that he can stand up in the trenches against NFL players at every single position.
Drew, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned talking to Schrauth and Wagner about, you wrote a story about training with Lauren Lando. Also, but wanted to expand a little bit on why you interviewed Billy Schrauth and why he left Notre Dame to basically a year early because he could have come back for a fifth year. And that, even though we kept hearing Billy Schrauth was going to leave, and I kept leaning towards 51% he'll come back because I thought he could have used it, but it's good that you were able to actually ask him because of course we haven't seen him since.
Yeah, and I mean, he just kept reiterating. I think he got that question maybe three times because people are just kind of popping over. But he just kept saying something along the lines of like, "I talk to the people I trust. I feel ready. I know I'm ready. I love the game. It's my dream. I'm ready to take this step." I did follow up. I was like, "Did that your injury history play a part, making you feel like you need to go and you don't want to risk it?" He said, "No, it didn't." So he kind of pushed back on the narratives and really just tried to focus on he felt like he's ready. I mean, you kind of get the sense that he came into the season with that in mind almost, and getting the injury
Yeah.
wasn't going to hurt anything. And I think it helps that he showed well in that last game. And he also mentioned during the interview that he got hurt in the first quarters when he sprained that MCL and still played the whole game. you've seen analysts like Daniel Jeremiah really highlight and tout that performance at USC. So I think he said he was playing his best football. He thinks he can play even better football, and I think he's kind of really betting on that carrying him forward. And he measured well. I know he didn't test, but coming in at full 6'5", 310 pounds, I think is the size that a lot of people wanted to see him have. And he'll test at Notre Dame's pro day. But yeah, I think he's just ready to bet on himself. And he still could. I've seen some people have him as a second rounder, so he still has some chance to still reach that potential. But even though I think we all agree he could have put himself in even higher position if he'd come back for another year.
I can't imagine him going second round, but I bet he has a career worthy of a second round draft pick. Does that make any sense?
I agree.
I feel like
Yeah, and
Billy Schrauth will be a good pro, and I just don't know if someone's really going to pull the trigger in the first 64 picks.
Yeah, and the dudes from Utah and certainly Francis Manonoa are great prospects along the offensive line. And Manonoa has been very candid in saying he got Alex Mirabel, the well-regarded Miami O-line coach, to help him already be cross-training at guard, even though he knew he was going to go to Miami and play right tackle every single game he played. He said he's been working at the guard positions throughout because they might want that at the next level. So you typically don't see too many picks invested on a guard in the first round, but you do see more in the second round as teams do try to find a guy that they think they can pencil into their line for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, but also not have the fiscal investment of a first round pick on him. So I think depending on how Billy tests at Notre Dame's pro day, coupled with his continued meetings with teams, and as long as everyone gets complete assurances on his health, and it sounds like that'll be the case. But he missed significant time in 24, and obviously missed a bunch of time again in 25. I think that's also factoring into his decision. He got injured in 25, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and I think he realized then he's put a lot of good football on tape, film, video, digital, whatever, and now he wants to bet on himself. I think Drew's terminology there is the best.
Yeah, and I agree. I think he said the injuries didn't factor. I don't necessarily think I bought it when he said it, but he did push back against it.
Jeremiah Love, 4.37, 4.36. We knew he's fast. We also know he's the best running back in the draft and one of the best running backs to come out since Saquon Barkley. Will not need to test at Notre Dame. I would guess Eli Raridon doesn't need to do a lot of testing at Notre Dame either, right, Drew? But what have you heard about? I guess Jadarian Price would be the guy that's where I figured he'd be faster. I also put Jadarian Price in the category of I know he's actually faster on the football field than no matter what than anything that is listed by his 40 time. I know that's not the way it works, but it does work that way. I'm starting about 7 months from now.
Yeah, and somebody said on our message board, and I think I agree with this, like I never saw him get caught or come close to getting caught from behind. So I agree. I think he's faster. I think I had the expectations based on what I told that he would run a little faster than what he did. I've heard that from somebody close to him that they don't think he'll necessarily run, even though I think I agree he probably could do better in the 40 time. But I think he really did well in the field drills. Like you watched that, I think he looked good as a receiver. He looked more comfortable catching the ball than I thought he would. He had one rep where I forget it was like a Texas route where he's just kind of running a one cut over the middle out of the backfield, and he slipped on the cut, got up immediately, and then made a nice like almost one-handed snag. And they're like Daniel Jeremiah on the broadcast is like that's the best rep. Like I don't care that he fell. Like the fact that he recovered and still made a nice catch is like more impressive than him just doing everything perfectly too. So I think he showed well and might come out of that thinking like I'm just going to start getting my body ready for camp or whatever I'm doing because he did come in a little lighter than I thought he would at 203, which made it even more surprising that he didn't run a little
Yeah.
faster. But uh, we'll see. Maybe that'll change. Maybe he'll want to do more. But I think Fields is the one who definitely will probably run again. As you mentioned, I wrote a story. He and Emil Wagner have been training with Lauren Landau back at Notre Dame. Lauren Landau wrote a book on training for the NFL Combine. The forward was written by Christian McCaffrey. He's a guy who has a lot of experience with that. Works with a lot of NFL players. So maybe they'll just be there training for that for the next few weeks and really dialing in a place where they're comfortable with to improve upon that time.
I guess this year's Drew Tranquil, JB, who trained for a 40 and got it there was Eli Raridon rather than Jadarian Price. I thought it'd be Jadarian Price. I remember Drew Tranquil trained for the 40. He ran a 4.57 at middle linebacker, and he said, "All right, never have to run 40 yards again for the rest of my life." It was one of the best lines I've heard from a real football player.
Yeah, no, you could tell like Eli Raridon stayed healthy all year for Notre Dame. The first time we've seen that. I think he's probably just starting to scratch the surface of his peak performance ability. And that was one question, especially with the multiple ACL injuries that Eli has had. You wonder just how well he can run. What is his top end speed? And he tested very well. Again, proved so well rounded in that group. And we know he's got great football IQ. I think all of those things are going to help him immensely. Again, I think that in talking with people and then especially reading a lot of the coverage, even though Jadarian Price is personally disappointed in his 40, nobody's really moved him off of that running back number two line that I've seen. Nobody of note. Certainly the more reputable people who break down the draft for a complete full-time living still have him. I noticed that I think the Indiana running back maybe moved up to number three in some people's eyes because of how well he ran. But again, that was just taking what people are saying. The Notre Dame two are the top two running backs, and that's sort of the refrain right now from all the draft pundits.
At some point during the season, and I believe it was the Boise State game, Price turned the corners, accelerated past everybody, and Priester and I, that's when we said to each other, he's just fast. It doesn't matter what his track time shows. Like that's just one of those guys that's really fast. I want to throw in a question from Jay Weave 5. I'm not pushing back on it, but you and I did not do what he is suggesting. Weave 5. After Jay Love's combine performance, did we as ND fans take for granted just how dominant he was? I don't think this podcast ever took Jeremiah Love for granted in the last year and a half.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've called him the best player in college football, not just the best running back in college football. I don't think we took it for granted because we chronicled so often on this podcast that it's realistic to think we won't really ever see another running back like Jeremiah Love in a Notre Dame uniform, and we won't see very many running backs like Jeremiah Love in any uniforms. Like he's that singular. The things that he does, like the leaps, we saw Reggie Bush do some crazy 360 stuff. We haven't seen anybody since then at the collegiate level other than Jeremiah Love do the leaps and the spins and the things that we've seen, not that effectively. And now we've only really seen Saquon Barkley be able to do the leaps and the backwards leaps and all of that at the NFL level. So, take him for granted? No, I don't think so. But I think that having said that, it will only grow that he will go down as arguably the single best running back in the history of Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has absolutely no shortage of freaking phenomenal running backs.
I think the one thing I took for granted that has nothing to do with his performance on the field is how kind of comfortable he got with himself by the end and how he presented at interviews. He had some kind of joking answers when he was speaking with the media at the combine, where he just kind of showed like he just almost had no shame. Like he was so composed, but I think he has a little bit of Riley Leonard in him by the end that I don't think I always fully appreciated, where he would just be himself. He would say things that maybe he shouldn't say, stuff like that, that I think maybe he didn't fully appreciate. And especially the growth, because I remember talking to him on the phone when he was a senior in high school, and he was definitely like kind of this introspective, intelligent, quiet kid. And for him to kind of come this full um, personal development and the confidence with himself and how he spoke. I think we started noticing it and we really liked speaking to him last year, but I think this combine, I was like, man, I'm going to miss talking to somebody like this.
He said it was the Purdue game where he shapeshifted on the sideline for a touchdown. And he talked after the game and he used the comfort word shoot probably, I don't know, 15 times in a 5 minute interview post game. So the next time we got him was a couple of weeks later. And it probably went all the way to the end of the interview before he said shoot. And he goes, up, trying to work on that. Like he even noticed that stuff going on. I just think that, yeah, he was, I mean, he all of a sudden he went from a guy that was going to be interviewed for the first time to about to get ready to get interviewed after every game for the rest of his life. That's how you have to change.
Yeah, he was a pro real quickly. I'll just say, like, after his freshman year, from then on, he was a pro. Like he became a pro in every aspect, from the way that he dove into the sports science to get himself better in every single facet, the way that he developed his brand, the way that he pursued his interest, to note his love of comic books and superheroes, and to tap into that with the New Balance deal. Like he's just now getting an NFL draft grade or NFL draft combine performance, but he's been a pro for 2 years now.
Not a lot of big pros in the Notre Dame victory over North Carolina State, but that was a refreshing change, guys, to see Notre Dame come back, send a game into overtime, and pull one out. Stay alive for the ACC tournament, of course. And I'm going to steal from John Bryce with his certified comment because Cole was certified in that game, JB.
He was electric. They very obviously stating the blatant here, don't win without Cole Serta. But also Braden Shrewsbury, I don't think had a turnover in 41 minutes. And that's significant because he is not a natural point guard, but he's had to handle the ball much more as this season has worn on. Jalen Harrelson did return and have some contributions. I would contend that's as good a win as Micah Shrewsbury has had in his 3 years at Notre Dame. Certainly, it's an incredibly damning win for an NC State team under Will Wade that looked like an NCAA tournament lock 7 to 10 days ago, and now is fighting for its March Madness life, though much the same way that Notre Dame is fighting for its ACC tournament life.
I feel, Drew, like that's not a win that changes people's opinions, but it sure does stave off the Wolves a little bit when you come back and win like that. Everybody that watched that game or anybody that turned it off and then found out they shouldn't have was probably pretty happy about the Notre Dame basketball program for the first time in a while. That's a good win to get, and I know the crowd really got into it there.
I agree. I was at the combine, so I wasn't able to watch, but my wife did go as a fan, and she was ecstatic. So to your point, like fan base, seeing them win, I mean, she I think fell in love with Cole Serta a little bit, seeing what he did. Like it gives people something to buy into and root for, and having a good atmosphere on a Saturday, stuff like that. I think is important to the fan base, and to John's point, like having some guard play kind of pick up and step up is important because that's really without Marcus Burton, where they've just looked pretty porous throughout much of the year. Even if Jalen Harrelson is scoring, he still doesn't look like he's managing and running the game and having a good flow for the offense.
4-12, tied with Pitt, and Notre Dame will host Stanford and go to Boston College. Pitt hosts Florida State and goes to Syracuse. So those are equally challenging tasks for two teams that will be, I guess Pitt will be favored in their first game. That's a tough game at BC. One game, who's one game behind Notre Dame. Pretty sure I talked about that a few weeks ago when we had the trying to predict the wins. That was the one that kind of took him off the 4-win line because they always play Notre Dame pretty well out there, and they just enjoy it. It's something
They
that's
they
something that happens when they're out there.
they always, not only do they always tend to play Notre Dame pretty well out there, but Notre Dame, for whatever reason, and its transcended coaches, has tended to play very poorly out there as well. So it's been a combination of one of those death trap things, kind of like there have been some years, not really under Marcus Freeman, but in football where Notre Dame would go out to Stanford with a much superior team and just not perform that well. So that's kind of the way it's been for Notre Dame basketball with Boston College, in my opinion. I know we've got a basketball question there. I'll turn it over to you for TO.
Yeah, I was going to keep it positive, but I'm going to ask ND Dan 106's question anyway. He said, "Gentlemen, at the start of the year, you all expected the men's team to be fighting for a bid to the NCAA tournament as a bubble team. I will push back on that quickly because I did have Notre Dame 12th in my ACC poll. Over the last few podcasts, you have referenced multiple areas the men's basketball team needs to address, NIL support, etc. These seem like excuses. However, while we can agree this season's a disappointment, is being minimum a 500 basketball team in the ACC achievable even with JB, this is important, the current level of investment?"
Yeah, so I don't really feel like we've made excuse. I don't think anybody, especially anyone directly related to Notre Dame basketball, will tell you they've heard me on a podcast and felt like I made excuses for them. Anything but. They would tell you I've made them walk the plank, and literally. And so I don't think we've made excuses. I think we've tried to provide context, but I also think that we said it last week in reference to the great Tom Noyes column, and he wrote a very fine column that challenged Notre Dame to commit to basketball the way it's committing to football, and I'm sure you have a number of sports at Notre Dame that would like that commitment. I'm sure baseball would say the same thing, softball, volleyball, hockey, any number of them. Women's basketball is not the highest funded in their landscape. They're the highest funded on the Notre Dame campus of the female sports, but I don't think it's been excuse making, and I don't think it's excuse making to say, look, they would have won two or three more games with Marcus Burton. Maybe if they have Burton and Harrelson unchecked throughout that time, they win 4 or 5 more games. I also think we've said that this team doesn't have an identity. It does not play smart basketball. We've seen the coach's son not play smart basketball. That's not what you expect of a coach's son. We've said that Micah Shrewsbury has done a very poor job with roster assembly, and that trickles down to his staff as well because they're all in it together. And we've also noted that they've spent multiple millions of dollars on this roster. They've spent enough money to have more wins than what they have. In the heyday of the ACC, I would say no. With that level of investment versus what everybody else is doing, they would not be. It would not be expectable for them to be 500. But I would say in this current state of the ACC, for which I have very little respect for, top to bottom, yeah, they should be 500. They should be a hell of a lot closer to 500. I don't know how to say it any more plainly than what I've said it. And we all agree, we'll say it again. We expect Micah Shrewsbury back next year, barring something completely unforeseen. And if that's the case, as we expect, then 2026-27 becomes a referendum year for Micah Shrewsbury.
Think I said this to you, O'Malley, before the NC State game, but I almost part of me wonders if the fact that they try so hard and still have struggled the way they do is almost maybe more concerning that there clearly is something either from a strategic standpoint or talent standpoint that's missing more than I think even I would care to always admit for them. I think one thing to add to what everything John just said, which I agree with, is just like it's interesting how they can kind of disappear at times, like offensively. Like I'm going back to the Virginia game, like they get out to a big lead and then I think they gave up a 17 or 18-0 run to lose that lead. And I feel like they have stretches like that every game where they just fully fall apart and can't get anything going. And if you get rid of a lot of those, like that would change a lot of things. So I think for whatever reason, like they just, I don't know if it's a lack of ability to adjust or really, weather those storms without making them too bad that they just don't seem to handle well.
They year one had a defensive identity, and
Yes,
then
they did.
and
Boring, but
then
defensive. Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. They couldn't score, but they had a defensive identity, and you thought you could see some things, and you thought you could see reason for optimism, and you would say, "Oh, when Micah gets his players in, you can see what they're trying to do." Well, now we're at the end of year three, and they don't have a defensive identity. They don't have an offensive identity other than shooting a lot of threes, and when they're making threes, they can hang in there with a lot of people. Um, but then they don't play smart basketball. They drive me nuts. Their assist to turnover ratio, and I haven't looked at the numbers. Maybe when this season is completely over, I will look at the aggregate stats for all 3 years and see what Notre Dame's total assist to turnover ratio is under Micah Shrewsbury. But it's incredibly disappointing. It's incredibly common for this team to have 9 assists and 14 turnovers on any given night. And that's just not the type of basketball IQ that I expected because you talk to people. And, Micah Shrewsbury is a really good basketball mind.
Yeah, he is a great basketball mind. And I will point out it wasn't the end of the Bray era, but the bulk of the Bray era, Notre Dame led the nation in assist to turnover ratio. And if not the nation, they're in the top five, leading to either the Big East or the ACC. And that's been a pretty big difference. Again, that was not at the end of the Mike Bray era, of course, to absolve him a little bit of that. That was segment one. In segment two, we're going to talk about the running game, wide receivers, and the world's greatest bingo card, among other things. We'll be back with segment two, burning up the boards. Welcome back to segment two, burning up the boards. We have a two-part question involving wide receivers. First, from Denver Maximus. Last year, Jordan Faison had 49 receptions to lead the team. With buzz around Mylan Graham and year two of CJ Carr, who will lead the team in receptions, Faison, Graham, or other? Is Greathouse a dark horse? Eddie Quebec wonders, the wide receiver room is full of talent but short on production. Do you see this as worrisome?
I think Faison will definitely. I'm getting more and more bullish the more I just kind of think about his journey through Notre Dame. I mean, he came in as a walk on, had played quarterback in high school. They pretty much taught him to run two routes well. He catches a touchdown in his first game. He's hurt a lot of his second year, and then last year he breaks out, leads the team. Now he's not playing lacrosse, which he's been playing all this time, and he's really, I think, just realizing what he can do on the football field, wanting to focus, on his NFL potential. And I think also the way in which he gets involved with the offense, just in terms of, I mean, you can throw it to him on quick screens, little things like that, that I think when you have a very accurate quarterback like CJ Carr too, and maybe the running game will change a little bit differently as well, that there's going to be even more ways they try and get him involved in the offense next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly take Faison or Greathouse versus the field. And honestly, I think I would lean towards the aggregate of Faison and Greathouse catches being more than everyone else combined. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm bullish on Greathouse. I think Faison has stayed healthy. What he's done with his body and his dedication to football is really admirable. Great points by Drew because he didn't come to Notre Dame and play lacrosse and then decide he's going to transfer to an FCS program and become a star wide receiver at Montana State or North Dakota State or something like that. He's been a very effective lacrosse player on a national championship program and then come and proved himself to be one of the most valuable offensive players for Notre Dame 2 years in a row when fully healthy. So I think that's commendable. I just think that Greathouse is such a technician. Whatever happened last year happened. It's over and done with. We know he's healthy now. We know he's back. He's in. He's all in. This is a key year for him. It's a year that he can make a lot of money, either for a final year of college elsewhere or to have a great year at Notre Dame and go into the NFL draft. So, for all of those reasons, I'm very bullish on the Great House phasing combo. I do think you read the part two of that question, didn't you, about the the talent being there, but the lack of production being worrisome to you?
Yes. Yeah. Is that something that you consider a concern pre-spring?
I do. Yeah. Like there's a lot of, okay, now let's see it. And I
Mhm.
think that's completely fair. Like Graham and Porter were hugely decorated high school prospects who didn't show a ton for various reasons at Ohio State, coming back from some injury now for Quincy, and what do they do from here? So, yeah, I think there's an element of that. We still haven't seen really anything from Logan Saldate other than some flashes. Can Gilbert become that consistent guy on and on? So, yeah, you've got to see it in a game, and there's arguably a bit more pressure on the wide receiver group this year than even a year ago because there's no Eli Raridan as a super comfortable escape valve yet for CJ Carr. I'm sure he'll develop one, and there's certainly very capable candidates. But I view wide receiver much like I view tight end. You think there's really good talent there, but it's okay to say we still need to see it in a game setting.
I agree with Drew that Faison will lead the team, and I have a mea culpa from maybe mid-December. I had a top 12 on Monday Musings, and Faison was not on it. That's wrong. He's one of the 12 best players on the team going into the spring. First of all, two guys are not playing; they're injured in KVA and Charles Jagasa. But Faison is also the best special teams player. He and Luke Talich on the team, and he's the gadget man. He can do a lot of things. I think Faison will lead the team. I do think Greathouse will be second. It's a really interesting point, JB. Will those two be more than the next five? It would be great for Notre Dame if they have a quality number three and you're wrong. I just don't know if you're going to be wrong, but it would
Right.
be great if you are wrong.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yep.
I
Next
think the
question.
concerns are,
Oh,
oh,
sorry, Drew.
sorry, go ahead. Oh, I
No, go
say the
ahead.
concerns are realistic. I think with having CJ Carr and knowing they might lean on the pass game a little more and him being a guy who is accurate enough and likes to know where the receiver wants it and things like that can kind of help maybe bring some of those young talented guys along. Whereas if they didn't have such an accurate quarterback or if it was a transfer coming in or something like that, I might not feel as confident in their ability to get a lot out of those guys.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to say if I'm concerned on April 26th about the receivers because I'm going to go in open-minded because they have CJ Carr. If they didn't have CJ Carr and they were going in with with a good regular everyday quarterback, I would be concerned. So I guess that's my way of saying yes, but they have CJ Carr, so it could be irrelevant. All right, question number two is a lot of words from Full House Backfield. JB, I'm going to start off with you. John Bryce, also the host of our Coaching Network podcast, I might add. I was remiss in not including that in my intro. Full House Backfield asks, the College Football Oversight Committee just proposed some stiff penalties to deter a concept that was new to me called blind transferring. When I researched the definition, it certainly seems to fit the path that Spencer Porath took to Notre Dame. Is the case that Porath, would he be considered a blind transfer? And if so, which of the following statements best describes what it says about Notre Dame in this new era? Number one, this is a big nothing burger. Number two, it's yet another example of the administration being aggressive in how they acquire talent, similar to undergraduate transfers. Or number three, ND just gave the Pearl Clutchers more legitimate ammunition regarding the erosion of values. JB, we turn it to you.
Full House Backfield is, if I'm not mistaken, a fairly regular contributor to questions on this pod. So he or she probably has heard us discuss this very subject in recent weeks, including just last week. Also, because this person is a gentleman and a scholar, I'm surprised there wasn't an option four for all of the above, because that's what the
Yeah.
answer is. The answer is all of the above. I'm not saying this is specific to the Porath case. There's others out there. Um, you know, one thing is there's still buyouts involved. Like you can, if you re-upped in December and you dropped out in January and you were going to go play at Louisville after you were at Pittsburgh and you signed a new contract with Pittsburgh. Well, even if you dropped out of school, like you signed that contract, you either are done playing football or they're going to come get you for the clawback money in your contract. So there are some other internal mechanisms that will keep this from being just insanely rampant. And I would expect some leagues to adopt some harsher language so that there's not guys grad transferring that know they want out at Tennessee and graduating in May with a year of eligibility left and saying they're going to go into the professional world and then they end up on Lane Kiffin's roster at LSU. There's still not going to be a lot that can be done about that. But I do think that this is, in talking with people, this is something that GMs want to see some action on. But where do you rank it in the pecking order of what's important right now with roster tampering and how many guys can drop out and get themselves admitted? Because if they do drop out, my understanding is at that point in time, um, the new school that they're pursuing can't assist in anything. They can't have any official contact with the student athlete until he or she, we should note that it's not isolated to football, until he or she is enrolled at that school and then wants to talk to them. So pretty much all these guys have player reps now. The representation component of college athletes has boomed more than any other segment of agency representation. It's why Athletes First is an absolute juggernaut in it right now, and there's a bunch of other really good ones out there. Curran agency group is another really good one. Vayner Sports, I think, is who have CJ Carr. They're very elite at what they do. And there's a Eugene Lee. There's a number of them, but there's still buyouts involved. There's still elements to it. It's not as simple as dropping out. And then you've got to know you can get admitted too. So like you can't just drop out on a whim. And like again, we know from online classes at Ohio State or Louisville, if you drop out at one of those, you're probably going to get admitted to the other one if that's where you're trying to go. But it's not as clear if you drop out at a Purdue that you can get into Notre Dame or that you can get into Stanford or wherever.
Yeah, I think that's I guess, I guess, good reason why they might start pushing back on it too is just like it does potentially put some of these players in precarious positions where they don't have necessarily that guarantee with where they're trying to go. They, as you said, they're not supposed to be talking to the coaches and stuff like that. They're not actually going in the portal where they can have that direct communication, even if there's back channeling and things like that too. So maybe clearing that up so you can have things kind of be above board and I don't know. I can just envision scenarios where a kid does transfer and the coaches get somebody else out of the portal and they don't really have a commitment to them or something like that. And it kind of puts some people in some precarious spots.
For me, it was 2-3-1 in the order. Another example of ND administration being aggressive. Three, more legitimate ammunition regarding erosion of the pure student athlete value that just cannot exist in the current form. And then one, it's also a bit of a nothing burger. No one's going to care about this whatsoever, other than Purdue when he kicks 8 field goals and Notre Dame wins 24-0 and purposely does not score a touchdown in the game just to rub it in, JB. Then Purdue will care.
Well done, Tio. Well done. All right. Question number three here from Brokeback Brian. Goodness. O'Malley seems concerned about the running game drop off from Love and Price, and I get it. Do any of you think a more cohesive offensive line and passing game, I'm going to say throw game in year two, can alleviate that? You're welcome, Bingo Board. Is there no way to alleviate it? Drew, we'll start with you since we already know the question was directed at O'Malley.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can alleviate it. Obviously, I mean, we just talked about Love being maybe the best Notre Dame running back ever, and he just blew up the combine. And Price is the number two in this draft. Like, there's no way you adequately replace those guys. So there are things you can do, and having CJ Carr back, and um, hopefully the offensive line comes together in the ways that we've kind of envisioned them doing last year, and they maybe avoid some of those injuries. So I think that can absolutely help. Um, but at the end of the day, like even if they have the next Audric Estime in the background, or other future NFL pros who show well in their first year as a full-time starter, it's not going to be what they had last year. And the biggest thing they're going to need out of the passing game is more explosive plays, which is something we've seen CJ Carr can definitely do, but you don't have two guys that you can hand the ball off and they can get 60 yards on a play where they should have been tackled in the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, I know they have a more talented overall roster, but if you're just to say list the top 10 players at every school, you last year for Notre Dame, you were listing Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, or Jeremiah Love, Leonard Moore, Jadarian Price, CJ Carr, Kingston Bilal, and then you're going down the list. That 10 was going to be better than this 10 because that 10 had Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Man, they are going to have a good running game. They will have a good running game. Neil Williams is a good player. I wish he was 1B instead of 1A. They went big game hunting in the portal, decided not to. Price is in, not Jadarian. Money is involved in there as well. I think Aeneas Williams will have a really good year. It is just people that are trying to compare Aeneas Williams to Jeremiah Love. I was the original. I'm the original guy in the Aeneas Williams train, guys. It was me at that camp. This is that's Duke and Notre Dame in
Yeah.
basketball. Come on.
Well,
Jeremiah Love and Jadarian
we
Price are the running
we
backs.
we just got through dispensing in the first segment. How did we take Jeremiah Love for granted? And he's going to go down as arguably the best in a program known for running backs. So I get it. Now, here's what I will say to this question, though. I do think Notre Dame can be a better short yardage offense
Yes, I agree.
because of the cohesion of the offensive line, because of Aeneas Williams' rugged running style, because of potentially a Kedron Young or Walton or Osborne or Nolan James or whomever. So I'll concede that. In fact, I'll be very disappointed if this isn't a better Notre Dame short yardage offense in 26.
I will be too, but I posed this question to Marcus Freeman in week 4. Can you go anywhere else in short yardage? And yes, I realize you are taking Jeremiah Love out of the game to go somewhere else in short yardage, which is just not something we would have said in 100 million years last year at this point. Oh, I think they'll be good in short yardage if they take Love out, which is what we're effectively saying now. I think Notre Dame is there's a short yardage issue if you can never put your quarterback under center and get a yard. And I think they'll want to do it less this year than they did last year. You cannot get CJ Carr hurt.
Our
Yeah.
next question is, oh, do you have something to say, John, or add?
No, I would like to see the studies of how many quarterbacks have been injured from
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I'm just saying
under
they don't
center
do it.
fourth and short sneaks or whatever. I know it's a concern. I wonder what the reality of it is.
For some reason, they just don't do it. I'm assuming he's probably not great at it because you're not automatically great at doing that, getting the one
Right.
yard like Tom Brady was. But I think they need that. Every team needs that, I think, in its arsenal.
Our next question is from Fancy Pants Malone. Other than Malachi Tony, who is the best player in Notre Dame's schedule? I asked this in the wake of Taylon Green and Dylan Thiemann destroying the Combine.
Yeah, holy smokes,
Yeah,
Dylan. Thiemann.
he was. Hey, Notre Dame made the right call though, because Tay Johnson was every bit the player Dylan Thieneman was, and they didn't have to pay him $27 billion to get him. So it was the right call. But Dylan Thieneman is no longer the guy you saw on skates against the Irish in West Lafayette when he played 27 yards off the line of scrimmage and when asked to go tackle Jeremiah Love.
I tried to do some research on this, and there were a few that popped up that I was considering, and I initially was going to go with Bear Bachmeier at BYU just because he's erratic, but man, he is dynamic. But I'm actually going with his teammate LJ Martin, the really good BYU running back. He was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year in 2025. He had some NFL draft prospects. He would have at best been number 3 or 4 back in that grouping. We know that for a fact. He's coming back and betting on himself, and he's getting a nice NIL payday along the way. But yeah, for me, I'm going with LJ Martin, the BYU running back.
I
Good.
did one on offense and defense, and I also had Martin. To your point, JB, I think he was sixth or seventh in the nation in yards from scrimmage with 1,560. So definitely a really productive guy. On defense, I went with Damon Wilson. He's a transfer from Missouri to Miami. He was a second team All SEC last year, third in the conference in sacks. Pro Football Focus had him as 54 pressure, so take that for what it's worth, but that's quite a bit. And he started at Georgia, Missouri for a year, now Miami, and we saw what Jason Taylor did with their defensive ends last year. So I could see him having an even better year next year.
Yeah, and I looked at some of the North Carolina guys as well. They were super active in the transfer portal. They feel like they got some difference makers there. Wisconsin brought in 33 new players via the transfer portal in addition to their prep class. So I looked at a lot of different stuff there, and I considered Darian Mensah, the new Miami quarterback. But uh, he's uh, he's a little erratic, I think, and he certainly isn't as rugged and tough as Bear Bachmeier.
First guy I wrote down was Martin, but the next two, one is going to hurt a little bit because it's Mark Fletcher of Miami who's playing with Malachi Tony, and that's a nice 1-2 punch. For Mark Fletcher to do what he did against Indiana in the championship game, that was a gritty effort, man. I actually forgot he was coming back because that's a grown man running between the tackles. Most fun matchup. Might not be the best play, not as good of a player necessarily. The SMU offensive tackle that transferred from A&M. He started the last 2 years. PJ Williams, best pressure rate allowed in the country at right tackle for SMU, and that will be Week 11 versus Boubacar Traore, and that'll at least be worth the price of admission.
That's a great one, T.O., because that cat was like a top 30 national recruit, I think,
Yeah,
when he went
yeah.
to Texas A&M, like pretty much a consensus five-star. He had, much like we discussed about Martin and others, and Fletcher, they had NFL opportunity. Like they would be draft picks. They're not guys that like, oh, they can make a team. They would be NFL draft picks. They're coming back. And then the SMU quarterback is an X factor, Kevin Jennings.
I think to put this one to bed for the next few months, Malachi Tony was one of the top 10 players in the country when the season ended last year, including all the players that played. Like you're including Love and Mendoza and all those guys. He was phenomenal. He's an absolutely incredible player. It's amazing that he was a true freshman and a young true freshman at that.
Who
From
played
Statman's,
quarterback in high school?
what's that? Yeah,
Who played quarterback in high school?
that's ridiculous how good he was in the opener. Too soon, but he was good in the opener too. From Statman 72, every writer cultivates sources that provide information on background which the writer is not permitted to publish. Can you provide any examples of how such background information ultimately did come to light over the course of the season, even though you didn't disclose it? Or have you received background information that caused you to rethink your outlook for an individual game or remainder of the season? Let's take that part first, guys, because so that would be background information, say in the spring or in August or in the summer, you hear something and all of a sudden you're like, well, I am changing my look of Notre Dame, this player or this team. Not injuries, no injuries included.
Yeah, I think so. There have been, um, I mean,
Like
I would,
Jagasa last July changed things. You're like, uh-oh, the opener.
yeah, it did. That absolutely changed things. At Tennessee, 15 plus years ago, Eric Berry, much like Kyle Hamilton when he arrived at Notre Dame, quickly became the best player on the field, even as a true freshman. And you're like, they got something with this guy. And he became a Thorpe Award winner and multiple All-American and all of that. And then, yeah, you find out, man, like they don't have a quarterback. Like you hear the struggles about Notre Dame in 2022 in camp at the quarterback position, and you're like, this is tough. Like this is a first year head coach who's learning in one of the three biggest pressure cookers in his sport, and he doesn't have a great quarterback. So yeah, there are definitely those moments that, especially as camp unfolds, or a spring camp injury that makes you think that's a difference in a win, or that could be a half win difference. You know, you might have had a team pegged at 10 and a half and feeling like you're taking the over, and then an injury happens and you're like 10 and a half, and you're suddenly probably thinking they're a 10-win team.
Yeah, I think this is definitely an area I'm working to get better at. But I think to your point, sometimes I feel like you can also overreact to that information. Like I think even just going back to like once CJ Carr won the job might be the lowest we probably felt about him all last year, just in terms of he didn't necessarily get the job right away. Kenny Minchie we thought might even win it at some point. So there's some things like that that can even color you the opposite direction too.
Yeah, I think anytime you hear something about an offensive line having issues, it's funny that one thing, of all things were wrong in camp info last year. I mean, not wrong, but CJ Carr ended up being pretty great, so it didn't prove correct. They were terrible at the goal line in goal to go situations. Remember, they were
They
0 for
were.
8, 0 for 8
Yeah.
and 10. We were told, well, guess what? Who was terrible at the goal line all year?
Yeah.
in goal to go situations, Notre Dame struggled as much as it has for with when they have a good offense in recent memory, because that's it doesn't count if you don't have a good offense, but they had an excellent offense and yet somehow struggled at the goal line. That was something we heard in camp, and we were like, oof, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and then you remember that Notre Dame was down to Riley Leonard and Will Howard at the quarterback position, and it wasn't unanimous one way or the other inside the building about whether they'd take the guy from Alabama or the guy from Kansas and the nicknames that they had for each and all of that. And you ended up writing a great story about it from speaking with some of the wide receivers, I guess Bo Collins.
Yeah,
But then weeks in advance before it happened, you hear that Riley Leonard is bringing the guys down to Gulf Shore. They're going to interact with Philip Rivers. Riley Leonard, my understanding is handled a lot of the logistics, if not outright paying for the logistics. He took care of lodging. I think all the meals were paid for, all of this stuff. You realize, okay, that's a pretty special leader.
yeah.
And they're really good at some other spots, and they're going to be good on defense. So I think all of those things you felt. And I will never sit here and say I called them going to the title game in 2024. I called them being a multiple playoff game winner in 2024. But you had a sense they really had something special with Riley Leonard because of everything you heard. And I ended up writing about it too for Irish Illustrated about him beating the coaches into the Goog, or how he would not leave the Goog until he won the last game of ping pong, like that competitive stuff. Maybe that's not necessarily sourced information. Some of it is, and then some of it comes out one way or the other. But when you get that kind of background information, you realize there's a little bit more to it. Just the same as like if you hear, man, these dudes don't ever hang out. Like it sounds trite, but it's not. Like, especially if you got a bunch of offensive linemen that don't hang out together, your offensive line's not going to be that good.
I think for the very quickly the example of background information that came to light, I mean, it was forfeiting the victories of 2012 and 2013.
Oh
We heard
yeah.
that, and that was just that was almost divulged on 47 straight podcasts before it actually came to light. But it's one of those situations where you just were thinking it might not happen, so you didn't go that route. But that was definitely one that came to light. You're up, JB.
Question number 6 from the great Dan Kelly. Is Charles Jagasa more likely to become Sean Crawford, aka a great season after many injuries, or Kevin Austin, aka a flash in the pan that Notre Dame never saw the full benefit of? Timothy O'Malley, we will open with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. He sent it on Twitter. It's a fantastic one. As long as you give Joggis a time, I will say Sean Crawford. Because Crawford missed 2 seasons in well, he did play just like Charles Jagasa. So let's see. Sean Crawford played 1.5 games in his first 2 seasons. Charles Jagasa played 1 game and then a half of a game and then a start 2.5 games in his first 2 seasons. So that's on track for Sean Crawford right now. As long as Jagasa makes it back into this season where he's practicing in late August and he's hitting that too deep, and all of a sudden they're thinking, should we unleash Charles Jagasa late September? I will lean towards Crawford. If Jagasa has more setbacks, that would be really hard. I think if he has more setbacks into the season. Kevin Austin's a hard comparison for me, Drew, because that's got nothing to do with why Jagasa is not playing. I mean, Kevin Austin, I thought maybe
Yeah.
would never. You just thought he might never end up playing, and for much different reasons.
I guess I saw the potential of the Kevin Austin comparison being like he's going into his senior year, he could break out this year and then be gone. So they've had this
Well,
talent on campus for all
I
this
didn't.
time, and
Yeah.
for various reasons, he hasn't been on the field, so they didn't really get the benefit of it the last 2 seasons when we know what his potential is. So I'm kind of leaning towards Kevin Austin for that specific reason. Also, I just think he can come back. Where Sean Crawford, his injuries, like he could never get back to the player he was going to be. Like he didn't have the other physical traits to overcome that. He still, I think, ran a 4.47 at Notre Dame's pro day, so he still had a lot of it, but he just couldn't endure that. Whereas I think Jagasa can still reach that type of potential and potentially go early if he gets back in time and has the type of year we think he's capable of.
Yeah,
Sean,
and it is
go ahead.
real quickly. It is Jagasa's fourth season on campus. He's still considered a sophomore. Like
Yeah,
it's
nowadays it's
crazy. Consider like seriously, like he is. And so because of that, and a little bit of an update, and I think you've heard some similar TO, is that while there had been another setback here more recently, there's encouragement there. Like we're being told that there's very strong encouragement that Charles Jagasa will be around when camp opens and be closer to ready to go at that time. And I'm sure Marcus Freeman will update it along with the medical staff here in a couple of weeks when Notre Dame kicks off spring camp. But that is, there is encouragement there. I think because of that, like if he's healthy and ready to go when camp opens, I think he finds a way to win a starting job. And then if that's the case, I think he's probably a 1 year starter. And then he's going to the NFL because of his physical traits and because he's seen two injuries two seasons truncated due to injury or completely obliterated due to injury.
Yeah.
The guy clearly has broken a mirror at some point, and the 7 years are keeping him a sophomore in perpetuity at Notre Dame.
Yeah, if he could start 14 of 16 games, the last 14 of 16 games and play well, he should go pro because he needs to, that's when you need to start your life, your contract right there. He's that talented. Yeah, that's a great point, Drew. I hadn't thought of it. I thought of all the other reasons Kevin Austin wasn't playing. Very quickly to Sean Crawford before we go to Drew's next question. This was the injury list for people wondering. Torn ACL as a freshman in camp. About 4 days into camp, as Matthias Farley said, it took him 10 minutes to beat me out for the starting nickel award. That's when he was a true freshman, tore his ACL. Came back, had a game and a half against Texas and Nevada in which he broke up two passes, recovered a fumble, blocked a extra point for a 2 point return, and intercepted a pass in a game and a half, and then tore his Achilles, ruptured his Achilles. 2 years, he did make it through 17, other than some Achilles soreness. 2018 camp, torn ACL again. 2019 dislocated elbow, came back from that, moved positions, started at safety for the 2020 playoff team. And remember, that's like a 5'9", 175-pound guy. Notre Dame has come a long way at safety, but Sean Crawford, kudos to you.
Our next question is from Tally Alley. JB, in 50,000 words or less, what are you hearing around this year's likely team captains?
It's early still.
I thought you were going to say like 2 words. CJ Carr.
Yeah, like it's early still. Leadership is still kind of coming to the forefront. Drake Bowen, CJ Carr, Don Schuler. Like, there's no reason not to expect those three guys. You'll have somebody on the offensive line. Can Bryce Young be one of the guys on defense that takes the next step, or somebody on that defensive interior? I wouldn't be surprised to see Faison in the mix with his work ethic, the way his teammates really seem to respond to him. But this question today, I don't have just a tremendous volume of information for it other than what I'm sharing there. I know they are pleased with the offseason leadership. You hear that a lot. But they are really pleased with the way the offensive line is working and bringing in the young guys and just kind of shepherding those guys along. So when I talked in an earlier answer about if you have an O line that doesn't hang out together, you're not have a good O line. This is an O line that I think, based on the people I talked to, is showing some really strong cohesion and what is it? Unit pride. So
Yeah, and kudos to Zach Martin for starting the unit pride that has never ended since Zach Martin in 2011. They still talk about it to this day. Harry Hiestand and Zach Martin, and the offensive line has always been together ever since. Well, there's two obvious. There is Schuler and Bowen as returning captains. They will be returning captains and named captains. I'm next going to say two more obvious: CJ Carr and Leonard Moore. It would
yep,
be a really bad sign if CJ Carr is not a captain as a junior, whereas he was not going to be a captain last year. And then I'm going Faison as well. JB, great call. It could also be involved talking to some of the special teams, but that doesn't matter anymore. And I'm saying Anthony Knapp. And I would put a
yep,
fair amount of money on it because he's always there. The other offensive linemen that are seniors are always trying to get back.
yeah,
That'd be interesting because I think I agree Leonard Moore is a lot. I mean, I think somebody if I don't think they let sophomores put their name forward, but I think he's somebody who could have been considered just with how much of a leader he became so quickly. You also see what he's doing in the community around South Bend. I know that contributed to what Emil Wagner being a captain last year and somebody they really want to put forward as a leader on the team. So, but if Knapp as well, like that's at least three juniors who could be team captains, and I think they'd all be deserving based on everything I've seen and heard.
I will add, I've never gotten this right, but this will be the first year I get it all right. And it happened in March. That's pretty impressive, actually. Let's pretend it already worked. Next question, two-parter. Denver Maximus. To me, the biggest storyline heading the spring has to be backup quarterback. If CJ Carr is injured, it appeared to be a drop off to his appears to be a huge drop off to his replacement. And I included Maximus twice because the real question here is Henderson has hands. Does the staff move on a QB transfer post spring if things don't go swimmingly during the spring?
That's a great question. And that's one that's a little more difficult to answer because this is the first year that there's not a spring portal. So you know who's out there right now. And my understanding is Notre Dame looked at who was out there and didn't identify anybody that they thought was worth disrupting their QB room to bring into and upset the dynamic. Now, does that change if spring is a disaster class for everyone not named CJ Carr? Yeah, but again, there's limited options. Are we going to have the silent dropout, whatever the term is that we discussed at length earlier in the pod? Are we going to mysteriously have someone silent drop out or graduate and declare that he's retiring from football only to 2 weeks later be in sunny South Bend in the first week of June and suddenly I've got a new lease on my career. So that's what we're asking to have happen here. I think that we've talked for months, even before last season ended. We talked about the need for an experienced backup quarterback because they were inevitably losing Kenny Minchey, and we're still there. So I'm very, very curious to see how the number two battle goes in spring camp. I would argue you could make a pretty strong argument that the backup quarterback competition is almost the most important competition of spring camp.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, it really is. If CJ Carr gets hurt, they're definitely gonna be in more trouble than they've been in a long time. So I think all the concerns about that are valid. And I mean, I think if they found somebody regardless, that might be somebody they go for. Everybody is at least signed now, so they might be more willing to, if there is somebody they can get in and they think they need it, they might want that insurance policy. But at the end of the day, if CJ Carr goes down, no matter who they get, it's gonna create some problems.
Yeah, I would if Teddy Gerard were just old enough to be in school, it'd be a little different because then he'd be part of the spring. But boy,
Correct.
that's Teddy Gerard to guide your team to through November or through October and November as a high school senior that turned
Yeah.
college player. That's a lot different than CJ Carr.
I don't even like answering these questions, not because I don't have the information or what. I just don't even like talking about the potential of an injury to CJ Carr. Throw that
Yeah,
shit stuff out.
yeah, yeah. That's the old "we don't practice screwed." Tom Moore about Peyton Manning. That's
Yeah,
"we don't
exactly.
practice screwed." Our next question, final question from Friendly Fire Fillmore, Twitter, first time. He must be a subscriber too, because this is an Irish Illustrated message board question. Please, each of you add the most important missing topic to the current Irish Illustrated podcast bingo card. And as Jack Freeman said, the most enjoyable thread to appear on Irish Illustrated in a long time, or certainly since December 7th, if you know, you know, is this one. Yeah, this is quite a thing. There are now two bingo cards, guys, if you have time to pull them up. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Frankencow is the person that made the first and second bingo card.
There are three now, actually. They've added a third.
Three now. All right, good deal. Okay. I have to read number three then. That's great. You guys have one you absolutely have to add. I have Pete Sampson's without asking him, but he will be on Thursday to add his own.
I didn't realize. God, how many cards are there
There's,
now?
go to the first page. There's three now. The best
There's
part is John
three.
Stott still has his own spot. That's important.
Well, free space. I like that.
I went with JB while you're thinking, so bad radio. There's one of them on there. I went with we got to have take the over on here. Take the over is on the bingo card.
Yeah.
That'd be on if there's one bingo card that we take the over all the time for assistant coaches leaving, transfers coming and going. So take the over is my submission, and I believe I know what Pete Sampson's will be. Um, I won't say it out loud. We'll let him say that on Thursday. But I know who Pete's is because somebody sent Pete a shirt on this one before.
I don't see one. I would contend you could have one for your vest collection, O'Malley. Like you have a strong vest
I got a
collection
vest right over there right now.
that that makes its way onto the pods. I'm frankly personally disappointed there's not one like a hat bingo because The
Yeah.
different hats are my signature, along with begging for meat from Snake River Farms. I already do have an unofficial sponsorship with the Bayha Winery. Thank you very much. But today I'm rocking a brand new Salt Lake Bees AAA baseball team. Their alter ego is the Salt Lake Dirty Sodas. And so I have my Salt Lake Dirty Sodas hat on. You're welcome. Google it. It's fabulous. And beyond that, the burps went on there for me. That is not me. Like occasionally I will hiccup because I've always got a water jug or a LaCroix. So we could do there should be a LaCroix space, a LaCroix bingo space because I drink a different if I'm not in a jug, I'm drinking a different LaCroix.
Well, LaCroix can make you hiccup because you got some bubbles in there. So that could be the
I guess
situation.
that's yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why I just natural water today, straight from the spring.
I'm with you on LaCroix. We should add that one as well. But it's honestly, this is very thorough. I mean, based on my quick math with the free spaces, there are 72 bingo spaces to choose from. So the only thing I could think of, and no offense, JB, but you mentioning that you're failed to do your homework assignment assigned to you by O'Malley in preparation for the podcast. That's the only thing I could think that they could add. But they did a very thorough job.
I'm
We
supremely offended. I'm signing off.
There's a lot of there's a lot of ones out there that could be offensive that we're not to discuss. But I will say we've had to retire one because it's just out now. But for several years, Kevin Austin's March 5th, 2020 practice was on the bingo card. The one time we saw Kevin Austin until he finally came to play. That one amazing practice. Well, we'll always have Kevin Austin's practice right before we shut down everything.
The internal one that we would have for our collective inside the building bingo card, so to speak, would be making Jack double over in laughter. Like that's like the people who know, like I don't have a good podcast if I don't cause Jack movement in his chair at least once a podcast. And like right now he's sitting stone faced. No, I'm just kidding. He's cracking up. So my work here is done.
I will add there should be a bingo card of things we were wrong or right about getting reiterated by us on the show too, because that happens quite a bit. All right, that's it for this that's Irish Illustrated podcast. I believe we touched on at least 35 of these bingo cards. I'm guessing that's the national average. For John Bryce, soon to be USA Today. Drew Ventock, Irish Illustrated. I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for watching and listening. Irish Illustrated Insider will be back Thursday with another edition. And I forgot to mention this entire podcast, Jack Freeman. We have a whole collection of defensive freshman interviews coming up on Wednesday. Thanks for listening.